Hey, good evening, everyone. Give the room a minute to populate here. As always, please give StreamYard your credentials so I know who I'm speaking with whenever a question comes up. Going to talk a little bit about navigation tonight and maybe a few other topics as we go along. As always, we'll do a little Q&A for anybody that's got any questions. Hey, I see people starting to pop up now. When you come into the room, say hi too, so I know who's there. Brian, how you doing, partner? As we're getting rolling tonight, while I'm waiting for people to show up here, I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody that's reached out this year that's offered to help. It's awesome of you to do that. There are all kinds of people out there in the Tour of Idaho community that are generally very useful souls. They do a lot to help out. All the offers to saw, all the offers to help me with Tour Mondays and stuff like that. I genuinely appreciate all that stuff. I really do. And some of you who've reached out to me, I'm going to get back to. I already have one or two of you, and we're going to figure something out. Let's see. A whole bunch of people have just come in here. So I see Brian. I see Nick Wood. Hello. Facebook user. J.R. Robinson. Hello. Another Facebook user. Another Facebook user. Andrew, how you doing, buddy? Connor Ward. Richard Seymour. Jamming Outdoors. That's Ben, who I spoke with just a little while ago. Scott Murray. Hello, Scott. Jeff Jensen. Looks like the normal crowd is all here. Can't think of anything updates. I haven't found out anything new yet. The situation at Elk City vis-a-vis gasoline is still up in the air, but Elk City depends on that ATV network up there. Hello, Tyler. Is so important to their economy. I can't imagine they're not going to have gas months before you get there. Hello, John. So I wouldn't stress that too much. We'll figure out what to do as the time approaches. And I'll have a plan for everybody, what I think is a best practice if gas is still out of limits in Elk City. Again, that's not the worst thing I've ever heard of because it might actually be quicker to just avoid going into Elk City, go all the way to Lowell, then just ride to Kuski and get gas and then come back. That might be the better way to do it. I don't know. But maybe we'll find out this year. Chris Coulter, hello. So let's get rolling tonight. And let's talk a little bit about navigation. And it's a topic that comes up every year. As the time has gone on, more and more people start to understand, hello, Jeff, why we do things the way we do. But let me just go through it again. For those of you who maybe haven't read the route description for a while, we talk about it a lot in the route description, why we do it the way we do it. And a little bit of history. When I first did the tour nearly 20 years ago, when Daniel Colvin and Stephen Verschure and I were planning it. Hello, Damon, and did the first couple of tours together. One of the things that came up is, there was no route out there. And by the way, when we're talking about navigation, we're talking specifically about GPS navigation. It's extremely important that you know the difference between a track point and a waypoint, and a track and a route, okay? If you don't, we'll talk about that a little bit later on. I think most of you probably do, but I use those terms very carefully, and it's important that you understand the difference between, for instance, a track point and a waypoint. And it's important that you understand what creating a route involves, which you're not allowed to do for this, versus creating waypoints, which I do for you, versus creating track points and tracks, which is what your GPS does. That track that your GPS creates is not a solid line. It looks like it because of the resolution. It's a series of points that are really close together. Resolution's generally 1 or 2 seconds, sometimes maybe as far apart as 10. So years ago, when we first started this, back around 2005, I think was the first one, there was no tour of Idaho out there. There was, it was an audacious kind of a plan. Let's see if we can get from Utah to British Columbia on as much dirt as possible. We'll cross paved roads, but we're going to try to stay on the dirt the whole way. And in order to do that, we did some really contrived things. We rode down canal banks and stuff like that. We rode down ditches. We did everything in the world, old riverbeds, canals, dry canals, and stuff like that. We did all kinds of crazy stuff just to avoid the pavement. There wasn't a ton of single track on the tour, but there was some, and there was a lot of double track on the first tour of Idaho, and then a fair amount of Jeep road. But we accomplished what we set out to accomplish. I think maybe that year there might have been a grand total of 100 miles in the whole tour that was pavement. Everything else was dirt, some type of dirt. So we did what we wanted to do. But we didn't know where to go. If you pull out like topographic maps of Idaho and start trying to figure out, it's a pretty bodacious kind of an undertaking because the maps are always wrong. They say there are trails there that haven't existed for years. And the Forest Service motor vehicle use maps, which did not exist quite like they do now, were equally useless. We came up on all kinds of things that were either closed or hadn't been sawed in years. So it was, hello, Brian. It was a pretty daunting endeavor the first time. So we loaded up as many topographic maps as we could. We put them in a metal map case on the handlebars of my bike, and it was an XR600R. That was the first bike I rode. I loved that bike. Had Scott Summers Racing stuff all over it. It was pretty tarted up, and I loved it. Heavy mother, had to kickstart the whole thing, and that was hard because mine was kind of tarted up a little bit, but it was a cool motorcycle, and I liked it. And it was actually a great single-track bike. Just like a 650R, as long as you don't fall off the side of the trail, then you discover why it's not. But as long as you keep it on its wheels, it works pretty well. So, we kind of just figured out things as we went along, and there wasn't any such thing as kind of a line on the map for us to follow. We come back the next year and we do it again. We have a little bit better idea about how to go, but what we did was, in both cases, we sat down at a local coffee shop over the whole winter, and we just stared at maps and kind of memorized where we were going to go. And it takes some gigabytes, and it takes a little bit of practice. After a while, you can actually sort of visualize, if you know how to read a topographic map for comprehension, what you're getting into. And I found that as we were riding along, we used radios the first day and the second year that, we'd be riding up this valley, and at least one of us always knew, hey, there's a right turn coming up here in the next few hundred yards, just because of our map study. And we didn't even have GPSs those first couple years. We rode the whole thing with compass and maps. That's the way we did it. I'm an old school kind of a guy. I was a geophysics major at the University of Kentucky back in the 70s. And, I helped make some of the topographic maps for the Kentucky Geological Survey. So Brunton compass, Alidade, plane table, and maps. That's the kind of guy I am. And GPS was just starting to get popular back when we did the first tour. So, we never had a line on the map to follow in the first place. Hey, Evan, how you doing, buddy? Good to see you too. So we never had a line on the map to follow in the first place. And for a few years, we said, well, why don't we create one? But there were two problems with it. One is, in my view, it kind of took the adventure all out of it. Again, a climbing analogy, I'm full of those. It's like top rope and everything. You got a rope going straight up. What are you worried about? Well, if you got a line on the map, what are you worried about? You just keep following the line on the map. So part of it was it kind of, I thought, dumbed the adventure down a little bit because we wanted people to experience what we did, getting out there, not knowing where you were, kind of having to figure things out a little bit as you went along. We always wanted to keep that element in it. But the second thing is maps are all wrong. And these trails change every year. Trails are organic. Trails the trails that you ride on the Tour of Idaho and all the trails in Idaho did not condense out of the ether right after the Big Bang. They are built by humans, maintained by humans, and they are often affected over the winter by landslides, avalanches, forest fires, stream erosion, things like that. For a long time, they tried to run trails up next to streams, and that doesn't work very well because in the spring floods come with the snowmelt. It eats out a lot of stuff. So now they're starting to locate trails higher and higher up on hills, which I like better anyway. They're better trails when they're higher up. Might have a little side hilling concern, but I love trails that are way up out of the creek, that are up on a side hill or up on a ridge because you can just see a lot better. Hello, Brett. Yeah, the waypoint chasing was a big part of the fun. Thank you, Evan. I've always thought it was too because it lets a little uncertainty come in. There's a waypoint coming up here, but this all looks kind of dodgy to me. I kind of like that because it allows you to experience what we experienced nearly 2 decades ago. But again, when we started trying to draw lines on maps, I never gave anybody a route, but we used to draw a red line on a topographic map. We still kind of have those loaded up, but we tell everybody, look, this is just kind of get you in the ballpark. It's not meant to be accurate. When we did that, we had all kinds of crazy stuff happen because, as all of you know, The cream of the crop in dirt bike world is in this forum and on this Facebook page. It falls off real rapidly when you get outside of kind of our little environment. And you get people that show up on dirt bikes and they're all about right hand. Everything is right here. That's the only thing that they know how to do. They don't know how to navigate. They don't know how to work on a bike. They don't know how to do any of that stuff. And these guys were showing up, and I don't know another way to describe it. Hello, Sean, except knuckleheadedness. We had guys that would show up, and one year, the Forest Service over the winter, and it was right here in Pocatello, it was getting out of Pocatello. They redid the parking lot where that trail starts as you leave Pocatello, and they just relocated a trailhead. Instead of it being at the south end of the parking lot, it was at the north end of the parking lot. There's a big sign there in a kiosk. And a group had to abandon the tour because they could not find the trail out of that parking lot. They kept trying to go up the old trail where it was a red line drawn on the map. And I like those guys. I felt really horrible that they abandoned the tour, but that's what happens when you rely too much on instruments. Okay, I don't know how many of you are pilots, but you've got to learn to fly outside of the cockpit. Dead reckoning. You got to learn to look around every once in a while, at least in when visual flight rules apply. You got to be able to look around a little bit and figure out where you're at. If you're Kennedy Jr. and you don't know where the horizon is, and all of a sudden you're flying over an ocean when you think you're over land, bad things are going to happen. And it's kind of the same way here. You need to recognize that, look, there's no trail here. I don't care what the map says. I don't care what the waypoint says. There is no trail here. So I have to go to plan B. I got to look around. I may have to get off my bike and walk around a little bit to find it. And we had another case where there was this was real famous because it was all over the internet. This guy got really pissed off because I had a trail. There were a series of switchbacks. It was pretty far up north. There were a series of switchbacks that went down this hill. And when I drew it, I was a little bit lazy, and I just didn't follow the switchbacks all the way down the hill. They'd been there forever, and you couldn't miss them. There was nothing about this. So a couple of switchbacks, I just kind of shortcutted. I dollar signed them going down the hill. This guy went up there and tried to ride straight down the red line. He didn't, even though there's obvious switchbacks here, you can see all the way down the hill that the trail switchbacks down. He rode down this gully that kind of dollar signed all the switchbacks. And then he was mad about it. He's mad at me, and he goes, well, you said do this. And I said no such thing. I've told you guys all along, when you get there, you have to look at the reality that's in front of you and do it. But as many of you are aware, there's no amount of persuasion that will get a lot of people to do that. So one of the things I did, and to be honest, it was kind of a filter, was to say, okay, waypoints, that's all we're going to do. And I'll create them, I'll give them to you, and you are going to navigate from one waypoint to the next. And since we went to that system 6, 7, 8 years ago, invariably, successful tour riders tell me that was one of their favorite parts of it. The navigational challenge was different. And I know that a lot of people are weaned in a world where you go to Adventure Rider and you get tracks for anything. This isn't that. This is something that's a little bit different. We want you to experience having to find your way, not being completely certain all the time. The navigation's supposed to be part of it. And I really think that one of the reasons that people like it is it gets you off your motorcycle every once in a while. You got to stop. You got to figure something out. You got to look around. You may have to kick some rocks or something. See if you can beat around the bushes and find where the trail goes from this waypoint that you're sitting right on top of. There was a group last year, 3 pro-level riders, and I think a couple of them are here tonight in this broadcast. They got a hold of me at about 2 o'clock in the morning one morning, and they were way up north. And they're going, it's dark, and we're having a hell of a time figuring out what's going on here. They'd had some mechanical troubles, and they were up there a little bit late. And but they said it's so cool, man. The moon's out, and every time we hit a ridge top, the moon's out, and you can see everything, and it's high adventure, and that's what I want you to experience. I want you to have that. You want to do a T2, you go ahead and make all the tracks you want and go follow them, but it's quite different than the way that we do it, where we ask you to follow waypoints and navigate from one waypoint to the next. The other thing about it is, again, these trails are organic. They change all the time. And by forcing you, Evan, that I knew you were there. So by forcing you to just say, okay, this waypoint's at the beginning of the trail, I'm not going to follow a red line of map. I'm going to ride the trail until I encounter another waypoint. That's far and away the best way to do it. Usually when you get on a trail, you just ride it to the other end. And if not, I'll have a waypoint saying, look, this trail bifurcates here. There's another trail that goes off. You want in. And I always try to locate the waypoints so they lead you in the right direction. If there's an intersection, the waypoint is almost never in the middle of the intersection. It's slightly down the way that you want to go. I tried to do that throughout. So that is my theory of navigation. That's the way I like doing it. GPSs are in cars everywhere. And I've got this new truck. I've got a 2022 F-350 dually that we bought. And it's got like the fanciest navigation system in it in the world. And every once in a while, that thing will still try to drive you off a cliff. Or it'll try to drive you down a blind alley or something. I don't pay any attention to it when I'm towing the trailer because there's been way too many times where we're on vacation pulling our 46-foot trailer. And this thing tries to send me down some road that's, I'm pretty sure both of the outside wheels of the dually are hanging off the pavement into ditches somewhere. If somebody comes the other way, we're screwed. I think you're far better off looking at maps and kind of figuring things out. GPS navigation is just not there entirely yet. It'll get there, but it's just not there yet. So let's see. Scott, the nav part of the tour was challenging, but so rewarding when it all came together. Yes, sir, brother. Evan, that waypoint leading worked so well, made it so simple to keep. Thank you. I tried to do that. I tried to think about where I would want the waypoint if I were riding and I didn't know where I was going. That's always the standard that I use when I locate a waypoint. Now, they're not perfect because trails change a little bit, and every once in a while, I don't think there's very many that aren't where they're supposed to be, but there's probably a few. But if they're off, unless the trails change, they're not off by much because I try to go out and ride as much of that stuff as I can every summer. Not all at once, of course, but in summers, historically, I've gone up and spent my weekends riding different parts of the tour, just checking things out and making sure that they're all still okay. All right. So here's what you need to do to navigate the tour. And I'm preaching to the choir here. Most of you know this, but just in case there's some new folks out there that are a little bit confused, we have waypoint files, one for every day. Download them all. Load them up in your GPS. Now, the question always comes up, what GPS should I use? There's so many brilliant GPS units out there these days. That's really kind of up to you. I'm really partial to the TrailTech Voyager Pro. I use 2 of those. And then I use a Garmin GPS Map 64 for a backpacking GPS kind of as a backup. The problem with TrailTech is that they make good stuff, but they're lousy manufacturers. And it's gotten worse since they've been bought by the same conglomerate that owns Climb and the rest of the world now. And their customer service isn't what it used to be. All the guys I knew that worked there are gone. And I used to be able to call and talk to people that I knew, and the customer service was excellent. They could answer all my questions. They were great to deal with. But, it's a different company now. And I've talked to a number of you that have told me that you're having a really hard time getting anything out of TrailTech, like Voyager Pros. I guess I talked to Andrew Hickson. He couldn't get one, and they didn't know when they were going to have them, which, of course, is goofy as hell because riding season is upon us. The reason for that is that TrailTech these days makes all of their money off the UTV market. They manufacture OEM GPS units for a lot of those dumbass four-wheelers, UTVs that are tearing the hell out of the desert everywhere. So that's their bread and butter these days, and that's what they pay the most attention to. But if you can get your hands on them, I think that TrailTech Voyager Pro, hey, Jeff says they just got in a shipment last week. Well, that's good because it's a really good unit. I use 2 of those. I have one zoomed way in, one zoomed way out. And then I have a GPS Map 64 ST up on the handlebars. And all it's doing is recording. Both of my TrailTechs are recording as well. But my Garmin unit is the backup that I use to make sure that I have a track. So I have 2 things I'm looking at to follow, one zoomed in and one zoomed out with nothing but waypoints on them. I've got really good base maps loaded in, so I load up custom maps, which you can do with the TrailTech Voyager Pro. So I load up all the topographic maps. You can load up the Idaho MVUM maps in there if you want to, so the trails are all on there. Just be careful because those MVUMs are not very good. They're wrong in a lot of places. So it TrailTech Voyager Pro, load your own base maps, load in the MVUM, and just be aware that they're not always going to be right. Zoom one in, zoom one out, then have your other unit up there. Somebody said a Gaia, it's an excellent unit. There's all kinds of them. Look, even this thing I got on my wrist these days is really good. I use this on my bicycle adventures, and it works great. So there's all kinds of brilliant GPSs out there these days. Let me tell you what's not a brilliant GPS, though, and that's your damn cell phone. And I get in this argument all the time, and I'm not even going to do it anymore. Cell phones are not designed principally as GPS units. Yes, they will work as GPS units, but the chipsets in every cell phone of which I'm aware, the GPS chipsets are lousy. They're just not as good as a dedicated GPS unit. The reason that you can get away with it in a phone is because typically the phone is relying on more than just the GPS chipset to locate. It's looking at Wi-Fi signals, it's looking at cell towers, it's pinging all kinds of different things to figure out where you're at. So it works well enough when you're someplace where it can triangulate and it can use all that stuff. It does not work well, though, when you're out of cell range and out of Wi-Fi range, and it's just depending on that substandard, in most cases, not all cases, but in most cases, that substandard GPS chipset that they throw in there. You know, you pay $1,200 for a cell phone, probably $1,000 of it went into that fancy screen, that fancy backlit AMOLED screen, and everything else is pretty substandard in a lot of cases. Really expensive cell phones sometimes have poor call quality as well. Like the voice quality is awful. It's like talking on an old copper line or something, some really expensive cell phones. So that's what I would do. I'd try to get my hands on 2 TrailTech Voyager Pros, but at least one. The other nice thing about the TrailTech Voyager Pro is that it gives you a lot of useful data other than nav data. There's all kinds of screens on there. You can get all kinds. If you want to spend a little bit of time wiring the thing up, you can get your engine temperature, oil temperature. There's RPMs. There's a tachometer on there, water temperature. It's got everything in the world about your bike, and you can wire the thing up so it tells you all that data. You add that together with the GPS capability, it'll play your music. You can answer your cell phone and stuff. It hooks up with all kinds of different things. It's a pretty slick unit. It's spendy. Last one I bought, I used to always get pro deals on them, so I don't know if I ever spent full money, but I think they're $500-$600. Is that right? Somebody that's been looking at them lately, tell me what they are. So that's what I would do. Do not use your cell phone as even a backup GPS. Keep your cell phone someplace where you cannot lose it. If you lose your cell phone, you are screwed, glued, and tattooed. That is, it's probably got a lot of your bank information in it. A lot of you is in that cell phone. So you want to whip it out when you want to take photographs, but I have a really nice, safe place in my Climb vest for my cell phone, and it doesn't come out unless I'm taking a photo. And, at the end of the day, when I'm checking on my email and phone calls and stuff like that, keep your cell phone safe. The number of people who have lost cell phones on the tour or destroyed them because they had them on the handlebars, they go, well, I got this $400 case. That $400 case ain't going to do shit in some of the big get-offs that you're going to have on a dirt bike sometimes. You're going to tear up your cell phone or you're going to lose it. A lot of friends of mine have lost cell phones. We talked about it, and I said, you're an adult. You can do what you want, but I wouldn't do it that way. I had one guy, a friend of mine, guy I liked a lot, soloed the tour about 6-7 years ago, and he said, I'm going to bring 3. And there's no way I could lose or damage 3. They were all done by the end of day 1. He was in a cell phone store in Pocatello buying new phones at the end of day 1. He trashed all 3 of them because he had them up on the handlebars of his bike. Cell phones just aren't meant to take that kind of abuse. Someone talked about the buddy feature on the Voyager Pro. I don't use the buddy feature that much because I usually ride by myself. It is a nice feature. But let me tell you something about the buddy feature. If you're going to use the buddy feature, do not mount that damn antenna the way TrailTech tells you to do it. The owner of TrailTech, or the former owner before the company got sold, was a kind of an engineer, some kind of mechanical engineer, I think. And he's a smart guy, and I liked him, but he had no shit about antennas and electronics. And so they use this frequency that's a very popular marine frequency for that buddy feature. And they use a simple dipole antenna. And the way they have you mount it vertically like this works great if you're out on water where everything is flat. But when you're in the mountains where things are not flat, that's the worst way to mount that antenna. Now, I mount mine horizontal, so the dipole is horizontal, because if you could look at the radiation pattern of that antenna, it goes up and down, just like this. So if someone's above you or below you, they can still get it. The other thing is, it's not as easily absorbed by the trees because the oscillation is this way, trees are that way, so you don't get as much absorption when you're in wooded terrain. And I tried to press that argument with them, but they didn't want to hear it. So I've done the test myself, and it works way better if you mount it horizontally. But everybody's got to mount it the same way. The worst thing is if some people have it one way, others have it another way. And it's a really easy test to do. You don't need a decibel meter to see the difference. Just go out and try it sometimes. So let's see what we got here. Jeff says, to resetable trip is great for keeping track of gas and daily mileage on the Voyager Pro. Sean says, fork out for the first full billet case. I agree. The billet cases are really good. The plastic stuff's no good. It breaks right off. But the billet cases will last forever. They'll get ugly and you'll get tired of looking at them before any wear makes the thing. Brett, a lost cell makes messaging a little harder as well. I remember that. Mintz had the $400 case that broke in the Verizon parking lot. Must have for the TT. Never had an issue with mine either. My test confirmed that horizontal is better. Well, there you go. Damon, he's a smart guy. It does work better, but you can't explain anything to motorcycle guys sometimes, especially if they have a BS in mechanical engineering or something like that. They're doomed. So, Voyager Pro, that anything you want is a backup except your cell phone. Now, when I'm riding along the trail, I don't spend a lot of time looking at my GPS. I glance at it occasionally, and I've got them set up so that I can see them seated or standing. And that's another advantage, by the way, of the TrailTech Voyager Pro. They spent a lot of time and effort making a beautiful display, and I think it's crystal clear. And here's the thing, you can see it in any light. So when the sun's coming over your shoulder in the afternoon about 2 o'clock, when you can't read anything else on your dashboard, can't read Garmin, can't read your speedometer, can't read anything, you can clearly see that TrailTech Voyager Pro because they did a really good job with the design of that screen. You can also see it in the middle of the night. It's got just enough backlight in it that you can easily see it. Even a guy like me that has to wear reading glasses anymore, I can clearly see that TTVP any time of the day. The display is really good. You can set it up. It's visible from all angles too. So when I'm seated, I can see it. When I'm standing up, I can see it, even though I'm looking at different angles in both cases. Well, so what you're going to do, let's see. I also love how you can interact with the Voyager, even with the thickest glove in the ring. Man, you got that right. That touchscreen is really good. Look, the people that designed the TrailTech Voyager Pro 10 years ago, I talked to those guys for a year about this thing. Jimmy Lewis talked to them a whole bunch. They had a lot of people that they, were talking to about what would make this thing useful. And they got, I think, really good advice. And the people that designed the thing and built it were smart enough to listen to good advice. And they built a hell of a unit. I love the thing. I've still got two. And I think I've agreed to loan them both out to people for the tour this year. But I'm never letting go of those things. They're awesome. So let's talk a little bit about, day-to-day, what are you going to do? So what I've always suggested that people did, I did this for you for a few years, but I just don't have time to do it anymore. Make yourself a route book. Now, a lot of people go overboard and they make kind of a roll chart. I don't think you need to go that far. But what I do is I carry a little notebook with me, a little spiral-bound notebook that fits in a jacket pocket or in a vest pocket or a backpack pocket or something like that, or a handlebar bag, anything. But just get yourself a little spiral-bound notebook. And what you can do is you can actually cut and paste. You can download the website and pages. You can cut and paste that straight in your notebook if you want. Or what I think is even better is just make yourself sort of a little Sean will know what this is, a climbing topo. And I make sort of climbing topo kind of things the route. I put the trail number, about how far you're going to go, in what general direction, and then what the next trail is. And I just have a little line drawn in my notes, and I have some symbols that I made up that I know what they mean. And, it's sort of a shorthand. It's personal, but I know what it all means. And what I do every night is I'm not worried about memorizing 13 days worth of stuff. I sit there every night before I go to bed, and I go through that route book and go, this is what I have to do tomorrow. Okay, so these are the trails I'm on. It looks like there's a big, long transfer section here. It's about this many miles. And I just kind of organize my mind around what's in that route book that I put together. And then if I get confused in the day, or even if I'm not confused, just when I take a drink of water, stop for a while, look around, take some pictures, eat, get a drink of water, I pull the thing out and go through it again and just make sure that everything's still pretty clear in my mind. It's not a bad thing to do at all. So if you study your route book and you've practiced a little bit just navigating from one waypoint to the next, you're not going to have any trouble. The people that embrace this method of navigation universally tell me not only did we have way less trouble than we anticipated, but it was way more fun than we thought it would be. It really added the kick that we needed for some more adventure in the navigation. So I think you'll like it if you embrace it. If you fight it, then, I don't know what to tell you. It is the best way of doing it, and I haven't ever had anybody disagree with me on that actually made a deep run into the tour. Now, at this point, we're about halfway through. I'll take some questions before I go on. Talk a little bit more about finding your way, and then we can talk about bikes. Sean Smith, I can't remember who I saw it on. Jeff Jensen, Michael Knight. They had an awesome cheat cord that they stuck on the bars that had all the challenge points for the day. One card for each day, just for those, since they are so important. I loved it, used it as well. That's an excellent idea, and I'd never thought about that, but it's a wonderful idea. Again, that somebody personalized this. They looked at the data and they said, okay, well, let me make this better for my way of processing information. And I encourage all of you to do that. I think that's a hell of an idea right there that somebody had. So I don't know, any more navigation questions before I move on to a different topic? If you have some, I can talk right now. Again, there is a place on the forum that is specifically dedicated to navigation questions for this year. And there you'll get good answers from people out there if you go ask. Typically, I know that there are some excess waypoints, and I think the D2 file, but you can clearly see that they don't belong on the route. I don't think anybody's going to suffer from that. And if I get time, I'll go in and I'll try to get rid of those. I spent a bunch of time trying to rid these files of everything that shouldn't be there, and I missed that day, or I uploaded the wrong file, or I screwed something up. Jeff says, make a spare copy of your SD card just in case. Yeah. Every day, I'd bring a bunch of SD cards with me because, believe it or not, SD cards are kind of fragile and you can knacker them up. So I bring about 10 of them with me, and I back them up every single day. That way you have your tracks with you, because you got to get me tracks within 72 hours of finishing. By the way, on that topic, I don't care how you do it. Most people did it day by day. So just send me, 13 days worth of tracks. I'm perfectly okay with that. What did we decide last year was going to be the only resolution that we'd accept? I think it was 10-minute, was it not? Because there were some people that were going down to 2, and it makes the thing too big to easily send. If I'm not mistaken, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, we decided a couple of years ago that it was going to be 10-minute resolution. I know it's written up in the challenge point thing, but I'm not recollecting it exactly right now. So somebody that knows, put it out there. But let's just say, let's just assume it's 10-minute resolution. That's what I want to see. One waypoint every 10 minutes. Yep, Scott Murray confirms it's 10 minutes. Don't want to see 2 minutes. Don't want to see 5. Don't want to see 20. 10-minute resolution is just fine for your beeper. Now, I'm talking about now the thing that uploads your beacon, your PLB, to the web. Your track resolution should be 1 or 2 seconds, whatever the default is in your GPS. So you're going to have 2 tracks. One track, all of us are going to be following for the whole trip. It's created by your PLB. You upload that to a public web page that you create, and then we can all follow it. And by the way, if you haven't bought one yet, the ones that suck are the spots. Everybody else likes everything else better than the spot. The spot has terrible maps. Virtually everything else is better than spot. I know some people like to use it, but you won't get followed as closely if you have the spot because everybody hates looking at their maps. They're not any good. So that PLB track that you're creating has got pretty low resolution. It's once every 10 minutes. So that's not the same as the track that you need to submit coming out of your GPS unit, which should have basically 1, 2, 3 second resolution, something really close together. Again, you blow up a track big enough and you'll see all those little individual points in there. Track points don't have as much information in them as waypoints. Waypoints are points that you create. You can create them with your GPS or you can create them manually. But a waypoint typically has a lot more information. It's a bigger string of characters attached to it than just a track point. So track point files are far easier to exchange than waypoint files. You get a big waypoint file, man, it's a huge doggone file. It's hard to save, it's hard to email to anybody, but track points occupy far less space. That's what I want to see at the end. You don't need to send me the track that your PLB uploaded because we can all see that. What you need to send me within 72 hours of finishing is what you got out of your GPS units, units, hopefully one of them recorded the whole trip, but that makes it a little easier. You can just send them to me a day 1 file, day 2, day 3, etc. if you want. Don't do anything to them, though. Don't massage them or do anything like that. Send them the raw files from day to day or send me the whole kit and caboodle if you want to. But don't go in and make any changes. I can see that you've made the changes if you do. And I start getting a little suspicious if you went in and massaged the file in some way. Haven't had that problem in years. Last 5 or 6 years, you guys have been honest to an absolute fault. It's impressive the degree to which people like fess up if they screw up or something like that. People are always like PMing me and going, hey, I rode a mile down the wrong trail. Do I get docked a point here? Nah. You got to really screw up before you get docked a point for navigation. You ride 10 miles down the wrong trail, there might be a problem. But even then, the only time you're going to get docked a nav point, which I talk about in the challenge section write-up, is really if you gain an advantage by making a mistake. We've had a few people that there have been 2 trails that kind of go to the same place. One of them's easier than the other. The regular route goes on the hard one. The easier one is shorter or it's easier in some way. And people take that. Yeah, I'm going to dock you a point there because everybody else that went the other way, it took them longer and more energy to go that way. You gained a competitive advantage by going the way that you went. You're going to get docked in error for doing something like that and an off-route penalty maybe even. So, all right. So I don't see any questions on nav. So let's talk now. Let's switch gears a little bit and start talking about motorcycles. Modern motorcycles are brilliant. I first started riding motorcycles back in 1977, but I didn't get very far then because I had a series of girlfriends and a wife who forbade me from riding motorcycles. And why I listened to them, I have no idea. I guess I like being in love. But every girl that I knew from the 70s to the 80s up until the mid-90s would spit on the ground if I started talking about riding motorcycles. And I was married for a long time during that period to a physical therapist, and she'd bring home like these grotesque photographs of people that she'd treated that had been in motorcycle accidents. She just said, it's either me or the bike. You got to make up your mind. Well, by golly, one day that didn't go her way. So I traded a canoe that she bought me for a birthday present once and got my first real motorcycle in the mid-90s. And motorcycles have just come a long way, just in like the past 30 years, which is the time I've been riding. And 30 years ago, they were heavy, they were loud. Street bikes, dirt bikes, it didn't matter. They were heavy as hell. Like a Honda XR 600R is a great motorcycle, but it could double as a boat anchor. It's that heavy. The older bikes, I think, were generally a little bit more reliable because they were simpler, a lot of air-cooled bikes, air and oil-cooled, things like that. As they started making them fancier, they were a little easier to break. So, you know, a 650R is a lot more primitive of a machine, a Honda 650R, than a 450R or a 450X. The 450X is way more fragile. You got to really be careful what you do to that bike. Whereas a 650R, man, you could do anything you wanted to it, and you weren't going to tear the thing up. But they've also gotten lighter. The suspensions are brilliant these days. And as long as you understand what the limitations of the machine are and you keep up the maintenance, man, they work great. Modern motorcycles are just awesome. I got a KTM 300 two-stroke out in the shop that I've ridden for the past 4 or 5 years, and I love that thing. It'll basically ride up a tree, and you don't even have to be that good of a rider to do it. That bike instantly made me a better rider because all of a sudden, these gnarly single-track trails that we put on the tour that I used to ride kind of slow, and I was always, you know, better not come off here. You get on that 300, man, and it's fun because the bike's light and you can manhandle it through places. It's easy to loft the front wheel up in the air. They've just gotten so much better. It's unbelievable. But you could still screw up. So a lot of people show up, and again, it's not anybody in this community because you all talk to each other and you know better. You want the lightest motorcycle you think you can get from one end of the tour to the other. That's it. That's your operating principle right there. And if I were going to do it again, I think it would either be a KTM 350 4-stroke, which I think is a really good bike, or I'd do it on my 300 2-stroke. The only reason that I would even consider doing it on the 4-stroke instead of the 2 is 2-stroke exhaust makes me want to pass out after huffing enough of it. And you're going to huff an awful lot in 13 days on the tour, especially at the speed you're going up some of these hills. If the wind's blowing up behind you, you breathe a lot of that stuff. I've been green before over 2-stroke exhaust. I remember even when I was road racing, I always hated it when there was I was chasing a guy down that had a 2-stroke bike. For one thing, they were pretty erratic because as soon as they got out of a draft, they really slowed down because street racing bikes that are 2-strokes, it's like a light switch. It's on or off, and especially the smaller ones, the 125s, they got to be in a draft or else they lose speed pretty fast. So you come roaring up on one of those guys, and you were trying to gauge your closing speed, and all of a sudden you'd find out your closing speed was a lot faster than you thought it was. So not only are you about to pass out from the smell of the exhaust, but you poop in your pants because you're coming up on the guy with a closing speed of 70 miles an hour when you thought it was going to be 20. 4-strokes, you know, you're going to get all the way through the tour on a 4-stroke. If you've adjusted the valves and maintained the thing well, you could probably just ride it all the way through the tour. I never change oil in the tour. I just ride my bike. I put really good oil in it. And, you know, it's like skipping an oil change or two. You can do it. Now, some people do. Some people change their oil. It's okay if you do that. There's certainly no prohibition. But don't be like the dingbat a couple of years ago who changed his oil in a motel room of a place owned by people who had been really good to all of us in the tour community and, you know, left oil all over the carpet, left oil all over the bed, oil in the sink. Don't do stupid stuff like that. If you're going to do it, go to a shop and ask them if you can change it out in back of their shop or something like that. Most of them will say just, yeah, fine. But 4-strokes, you can get them through the tour as long as they're set up well when you start out. Now, you can get a 2-stroke all the way through the tour as well. A lot of people have done it. I think JJ has a 250 2T that he rides. I know Sean Smith's ridden a 2-stroke. Brett Asper's ridden a 2-stroke. There have been plenty of people that have done it. But here's the deal. You better start out with a fresh engine because you're really going to need a rebuild by the time you get to day 13. You will absolutely wear your 2-stroke out. So you got to start with a fresh engine, and you're going to need one when you get done. So there's a little bit of expense that goes into that you might not have with a lot of 4Ts. And I think the KTM 350 is maybe, 10, 15 pounds heavier than the 300 2-stroke. I haven't looked at the specs this year, but they've always been pretty close. I really like that 4-stroke 350 KTM. I think it's a wonderful bike. Another brilliant bike. Handles great. Suspension's good right out of the box. You just don't have to do a lot of it. Jeff says, why a couple of us chose the 250 over to 300 2-strokes, better mileage, unless now, mine's carbureted. So I don't have all the fancy modern fuel injection stuff. I don't like that. Not on trail bikes. I like carbureted bikes because I could work on them. And I got that fancy carburetor that sold out. That guy in Colorado sells it. What the hell is the name of the thing? It's really nice. And everybody said, this is the thing that you need. And my bike went from getting my 300 two-stroke, got horrible fuel economy out of the box. It was awful. And I mean, it was less than 30 miles to the gallon. Electron, there you go. Yep. So I bought Electron. And when I bought the Electron, at first, it didn't improve it that much, and it actually diminished the performance of the motorcycle. But the guys at Electron were really cool. You know, I'd call them up and say, this is what it does. And they kept sending me different carbs. So they'd say, okay, pack that one up, send it back, and we'll send you a new one. And by the time I got, I think it was my third one, it was butter. The setup was perfect. And the fuel metering was perfect. The power was right there, right off the throttle. You got a nice burst of power. And it was nice and linear all the way up to as fast as a guy like me wants to go. And the thing about it is, it went from about less than 30 miles to the gallon, where if I'm riding my trail pace, which isn't incredibly fast, and I like to coast down a lot of hills, I treat the thing like a mountain bike. I use gravity an awful lot to extend my range. And there are places on the tour where you can coast for miles. Turn your motor off, coast. It's quieter. You get to hear some sounds that you don't normally hear when your motor's going. But I was starting to get like 55 and 60 miles to the gallon. So it close to doubled my fuel economy when I put the Electron on. So my 300 actually does really well. I don't even have the biggest tank on it that I can put on it. I think I've got a 6-gallon tank, I think, for that 300. But I've got one that's a little less than 5 gallons that's on it. And it does just fine for me, that and a couple of giant loop fuel bags, and you're good to go. So let's see. Yeah, a bunch of people told me it was Electron. Thank you. Evan says 80 miles on a stock TE 300 tank. There you go. Electron's out of Texas, yeah, but the guy that's their big marketing dude's in Colorado, and I've forgotten his name too, but they are in Texas. I dealt with the Colorado guy who sells a lot of them, and he was really, really good. Evan also says 501 is a rad platform. They sure are. They're Husqvarna, KTM, Gas. There's so many wonderful motorcycles out there anymore. Slavens Racing. There you go, Scott. Thank you. Jeff Slavens is a good guy, and he's the guy that I talk with a lot, and he just hooked me straight up. He was never bothered when I talked to him. He talked to me for a long time, and he'd say, describe to me in detail what it's doing. He'd ask me to go make a few tweaks on it, fiddle with the metering rod a little bit, and he'd go, okay, I know what to do. Send that one back. And sometimes I would get the new one. I mean, he trusted me too, and I don't know that guy. Don't know him from Adam. But sometimes I get the new one before I'd even box the other one up to send it back. They were awesome to deal with. Jeff Slavens Racing. And so I'm really happy with mine, but people have mixed results. The same things don't work for everybody, so who knows. But I really like my 300 and my Electron. I think it's worked really well. But again, all these people are talking about these great bikes. They're all wonderful. Gas, Beta, Husqvarna, they're all wonderful motorcycles. But get a light one. Don't get a big tank to bring on the tour. Every year, there's somebody that shows up because they want to prove Martin wrong. And they show up on some completely dumb bike like a 1290 Tour, a KTM 1290 Tour bike or something like that. Now, I think that I'm certain that there are people out there that have the ability to ride the entire tour of Idaho on some big-ass motorcycle. There was a guy that went to that quarry in Austria a couple years ago, Erzberg, and he rode some big-ass KTM motorcycle that he'd modified a lot, but he rode it and he finished. He did a pretty good job. The tour's a lot more of that. It's 13 days, not just 1 or 2. It's a long way you got to go. But even if somebody makes it, I'm not going to feel bad about ever having told anybody you want the lightest bike possible, because it would really suck on a big, heavy bike. It's just a lot more effort, and it's going to be a lot less fun. When you're on these light bikes that all of us have now, and you're riding that gnarly stuff up there above Leadore, that stuff is fun on light bikes. Yeah, Jeff says, why make it harder? Jeff, what bike would you rather be on riding that gnarly stuff above Leadore? Your 250 or some big-ass 750 or something like that, some dual sport? Yeah, we are not Chris Birch. 500 is as big as you should go. Yeah. Jimmy Lewis is a big fan of the KTM 500s, and they don't weigh that much more than the 350s. But to a guy like me, I'm really sensitive to 20 pounds. So that 20 pounds that you would have to go up would bother me a lot. Yeah, Evan 701. That's what you get when you deal with these high motor guys. You get all this stuff. I would never do it on anything as big as a 701. I want the lightest thing possible. I usually try to keep my bikes with all of the stuff on them under 300 pounds. That's what I'm shooting for when I do it. Not counting water and fuel, but I try to keep my whole kit as far under 300 pounds as I can get. And next week when we talk kits, Scott Murray had a pretty Spartan kit. I was pretty stoked to see that. The pros had pretty Spartan kits last year. There was a guy from Canada a few years ago, Bruce Baker. He had a really Spartan kit. I carry almost nothing with me when I go. And I buy stuff along the way. If I need a raincoat, I buy it. I buy a cheap plastic raincoat, which will work just as well as your Gore-Tex in most of the conditions you're going to be riding. If I get cold, I stop and buy a sweatshirt somewhere. I look at the weather report when I get up every morning. What's it going to be doing where I'm going? If I see rain, guess what? Another plastic raincoat. If it looks like it's going to get cold and snow, I hate to do it, but I'll spring for a Patagonia jacket at the village at North Fork if it means finishing the tour. So somebody says they love the 250 Yami, a little bit heavy, but yeah, it's a nice bike. I think my Beta 500 weighs less than my KTM 350. Could be, Damon. They're getting awfully good. 350 was perfect for me. I think it's perfect for a lot of people. The 350 the last few years has been the most popular tour bike, that and the 500s. I borrowed Evan's rain jacket an hour before it starts raining. It's heavy, but crazy stable with the fuel tank in the rear, hooks up and goes. But 501 is pretty damn fun. Well, there you go. The more mass you have, the more work you have to do. It's that frickin' simple. That's all there is to it. So again, I acknowledge there are brilliant motorcycle guys out there that can ride these big, heavy bikes and all this gnarly terrain. I'm not one of them. And even if I was, I was a pretty good climber back in the day. And I didn't believe in carrying anything that I didn't need, because it's just more fun. You can move faster. So when we did big walls, I didn't carry sleeping bags and stuff like that, man. I carried a bivy sack and maybe an extra jacket, and I'd just get a little bit cold at night, eat as much food as I could before I went to bed. But I always liked being able to move fast, and light equals fast in the mountains. It also equals fast on your motorcycle. So if you're a brilliant rider, yeah, you can sure do it on a heavy bike, but you'll be doing it faster and with less effort on probably a lighter bike, especially over the course of nearly 2 weeks. All right, that's as far as I want to go tonight. Next week, we'll talk about kits, and I'll tell you what I took with me the last few times I've done it. My stuff's all up on the forum, the kind of stuff I carry. Most people, I think there's a pretty high degree of agreement about what you should bring and what you couldn't. And someone feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've all of us in the past few years have kind of come to a common understanding that you line up your kit, you look at everything you're going to take, and you pare it down to what you think's the absolute minimum. And then almost everybody says, then you throw away half of that stuff. You want to go as light as you can. I don't personally like strapping a lot of stuff to my motorcycle. I prefer to have it on my back. So I have a set of giant loop Mojave bags, because the Mojaves are the perfect size. You can't fit stuff in them that you don't need. Then I've got a couple of their fuel bladders, a couple of 1-gallon fuel bladders. I run a 5-gallon tank. And the stuff that goes in the Mojave bags are like, I strap my fuel bags onto those. I'll put like my spare sneakers in there, a few things like that. Toolkit, but almost everything goes in my backpack and my vest. I have a backpack that I wear over a Climb vest, and I like it up there. I wrote a big, long tech article about why I think that makes sense, but it's another one of those kind of things where forget about the technical stuff, forget about the physics. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. And that's all there is to it. I don't even mind carrying a saw in a backpack. I've got a backpack that's made to carry a saw. I could reach back over my shoulder, pull the thing out. It works quite well for me, but that's going to bug the crap out of some people. So I totally get how people are going to reach perfectly well-reasoned conclusions that are not the same as mine. And as, oh God, here's somebody wanting to start a fight. So let's see. Evan gave the last good comment, less is more, which I would expect for him. Then there's, enjoyed this, need to get back on my radar, look forward to following along this year, don't know who that is. And then finally, some anonymous knucklehead says, heated grips. I don't know who that guy is, but he better keep right on going when he comes past that flagpole. Heated grips. What are you guys? I can't, in this politically correct world, I can't even speculate without being canceled on what I think might be your problem if you got to have heated grips for the Tour of Idaho. But you know what's going on in my head right now. Isn't that right, Jensen? Jensen, he's a gentleman. He's got all that heated grips and stuff. He's one of these high-dollar guys, has everything in the world. I think he probably, gets his little espresso where he pulls in every place in the morning, but he sure put the boots to the Tour of Idaho several times. Got a little cold once doing it, though. You can have my heated grips when you pry them from my dead warm hands. That's just another thing that's personal preference. And for those of you who don't know, we've teased each other about heated grips over the years. I didn't even know I had them. But I've got them on my KTM Super Duke. I've got a 1290 Super Duke R. And I just found out this winter it had heated grips on. I had no idea. So now I'm one of the sinners too. I have heated grips on one of my bikes. So what the hell am I talking about? JJ says not on his bike. Thank you very much. I knew we were friends. All right. Any more questions before I sign off tonight? And let's get back to what I was doing. Oh, God. Scott Murray. I wouldn't attempt it without him. Smoky Bar is chilly in the early morning hours. Man up. Cowboy the fuck up. That's all I got to say. Duff didn't tell Mike and I about his until halfway through. That's the way I'd be, man. If I had him, I'd keep my mouth shut. It's not manly. That's all I can think. It's a generational thing. What can I say? I've spent many, many years warming up my hands on the headers of my motorcycle. I got gloves that have singe spots all over them. All right. Once again, you've wasted another perfectly good hour of your life that you can't get back with a knucklehead like me. We'll talk about that more next week. That's a cute saw I saw you have there, Scott. That was a big line from last year. We have a lot of fun with this. The people that are in this community are the best people I've ever met. They have great senses of humor. Nobody takes themselves seriously, which I really dig. And that's uncommon in motorcycle world because, as you all are aware, motorcycle world is full of people that take themselves entirely too seriously. But in this group, we have people that are capable of laughing at themselves, being self-deprecating. It's what makes it so much fun. I've never met a humbler group of people with such high skills. There are people in this group that are just completely brilliant, superb riders, and they're the humblest people you'd never met. They never tell you that. You got to beat it out of them or go riding with them and find it out on your own. All right, Jake, Evan, Jeff, see you all next week. Cheers.